Everyone thought Pastor Creflo Dollar had everything under control: the influence, the wealth, the global following, and the confidence of a man who believed he was chosen for something bigger. But behind that polished certainty, something was quietly collapsing, piece by piece. In recent months, the man who once preached unshakable prosperity has been forced to confront consequences he never expected. And now, as painful truths surface, Creflo Dollar is facing the one thing he never prepared his followers for: the possibility that everything he built may have been rooted in a devastating mistake. The rise that began in a cafeteria. Creflo Augustus Dollar Jr.'s story did not begin in a mansion, a megachurch, or a television studio. It began on January 28, 1962, in College Park, Georgia, inside a modest home shaped by discipline and faith. His father worked as a police officer, and his mother served food in the cafeteria of Kathleen Mitchell Elementary School. That detail, seemingly small at the time, would follow him decades later in ways he never expected. As a child, he never imagined becoming a pastor. His dream was to play professional football, and he carried that ambition with him into the early 1980s when he enrolled at West Georgia College. But one serious injury shattered that path, marking the first of many turning points that would define his life. During recovery, he started attending Bible study sessions, not out of passion, but because he needed something to fill the quiet. Yet one day, he described feeling born again, a moment that changed the direction of his life permanently. Soon he was leading small Bible study meetings of his own, gatherings that grew faster than he ever expected. Among the attendees was a young woman named Taffy Bolton, who would later become his wife and lifelong partner in ministry. By 1984, Dollar earned his degree in educational therapy and took a job at Bronner Psychiatric Institute, helping people with learning challenges. But despite being good at the work, he could not escape the growing pull toward ministry. 2 years later, in 1986, he made a choice that would shape everything. He founded World Changers Ministries Christian Center in the cafeteria of Kathleen Mitchell Elementary, the same place where his mother once served meals, and where he himself had once been part of the school's first Black integration group. Only 8 people attended that first service, but the message he preached, simple, confident, and practical, resonated. Crowds grew quickly, and just as his congregation expanded, so did his ambition. What began in a cafeteria would soon transform into one of the largest megachurches in America, and the prosperity message he preached would make him a global figure. But hidden in that rise were cracks that would one day widen into something far more devastating. The prosperity message that built an empire. As World Changers Ministries evolved, the message that defined Creflo Dollar's rise also became the foundation of his greatest controversies. Throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s, Dollar refined a doctrine that would become the centerpiece of his global influence: the prosperity gospel. He preached that faith, positive confession, and generous giving, especially tithing, could unlock financial abundance and personal success. To struggling families, it sounded like hope. To believers searching for a second chance, it felt like divine strategy. And with every sermon, every broadcast, and every promise of breakthrough, the crowds continued to multiply. By 1991, his ministry had grown so large that he renamed it World Changers Church International, reflecting the reach he believed God had given him. His radio and television programs soon followed, culminating in the launch of Changing Your World. These broadcasts brought his teachings into millions of homes. By the mid-1990s, he was no longer a local pastor. He was an international televangelist, and his congregation stretched far beyond College Park. People in Africa, Canada, India, and the UK began following his messages, believing that financial miracles were finally within reach. The World Dome, a massive 8,500-seat sanctuary completed in 1995 at a cost of nearly $20 million, symbolized his ascent. Dollar insisted it was built without bank financing, a testament, he said, to what faith and giving could accomplish. By the mid-2000s, WCCI reported over 30,000 members and nearly $70 million in annual revenue. And as the ministry expanded into New York, Los Angeles, Toronto, Johannesburg, Houston, and the Gold Coast, Dollar announced a vision of 500 fellowship churches around the world. Yet beneath the momentum, there was a growing tension. The more he preached prosperity, the more critics questioned the wealth he personally accumulated from that message. Supporters saw him as living proof that faith produced abundance. Skeptics saw something else, a pastor whose lifestyle appeared to mirror corporate CEOs more than spiritual leaders. Luxury homes, Rolls-Royces, private jets, each new purchase deepened the divide between admiration and suspicion. Still, the machine kept growing. Dollar believed he was building a spiritual empire. But others wondered whether he was building something far more fragile, a structure that could collapse the moment one pillar of his theology was shaken. And that moment was coming. Wealth, luxury, and the first cracks in the foundation. As Creflo Dollar's ministry expanded, so did the spotlight on his personal lifestyle. A level of wealth rarely seen among pastors, even those within the prosperity gospel movement. While many of his followers lived on modest incomes, with the average household in College Park earning around $29,000 a year, Dollar owned an estate worth $3.4 million in Fayetteville, Georgia. The home sat on 182.5 acres, complete with a massive fountain, pool, long stone walls, and a private gated drive that shielded the property from public view. It became a symbol of both his success and his growing disconnect from the people he preached to. He also owned a high-rise condo in New York City's Time Warner Center, purchased for $2.5 million and later sold for $3.75 million, a $1 million profit. There was another home in New Jersey, estimated at over $2 million. His garage reportedly included multiple Rolls-Royces, with at least one valued around $460,000. To his critics, these things represented extravagance, but to Dollar, they were signs of God's blessing. Even his means of transportation reflected the scale of his ambition. Long before the jet scandal erupted, Dollar had operated a Gulfstream G3, an aging aircraft that had already experienced mechanical failures, one over the Pacific Ocean, another during takeoff in London. He insisted that commercial airlines didn't fly his schedule, and that a private jet was a ministry necessity, not a luxury. Still, each of these assets, the homes, the cars, the jets, chipped away at the credibility of his message for many observers. Church watchdog groups began raising concerns. Ministry Watch repeatedly gave his organization an F rating for financial transparency, citing his refusal to disclose basic audited records. Between 2007 and 2011, the U.S. Senate Finance Committee investigated him and 5 other televangelists, questioning whether ministry funds were being used for personal gain. Dollar refused to turn over financial documents, arguing that the government had no authority to examine his records. Legally, he survived that chapter. No charges were filed, but reputationally, the damage was done. For the first time, the foundations of his public image began to show cracks. His critics saw a pattern: wealth without accountability, spiritual authority without transparency. And what came next? An event that would become one of the most infamous moments of his career, would push those cracks wide open. The $65 million jet scandal that shook the nation. By 2015, Creflo Dollar was no stranger to criticism. But nothing prepared him for the public firestorm that ignited when he launched Project G650, a fundraising campaign asking supporters to help him purchase a Gulfstream G650 private jet worth $65 million. The request stunned even longtime followers. Dollar insisted the jet wasn't about luxury, but about doing the work of God. His previous aircraft, a Gulfstream G3 from 1984, had suffered major mechanical issues, including an engine failure over the Pacific and a nose gear collapse in London. Dollar argued that flying commercial wasn't an option because airlines didn't operate on God's schedule. The campaign asked 200,000 people to donate at least $300 each, a request that quickly spread across social media, mainstream news outlets, and religious communities. Almost immediately, aviation experts began pointing out inconsistencies. Dollar's ministry claimed the new jet would allow them to transport 100,000 pounds of food and supplies for humanitarian work. But the G650's baggage capacity was only around 2,500 pounds, far below what the ministry publicly promoted. The backlash was swift and intense. Critics questioned why a pastor needed the most expensive private jet in the world. Why couldn't he choose a smaller, more affordable plane? Why did his followers, many earning far less than he did, have to pay for it? Even within the Christian community, leaders spoke out. Gospel artist Kirk Franklin openly criticized the idea that material abundance signified faith, calling it a sign of a shortage of character. Facing national outrage, the fundraising webpage was quietly removed within days. But Dollar did not back down. During a sermon shortly after the controversy, he told his cheering congregation, "If I want to believe God for a $65 million plane, you cannot stop me. I'm going to dream until Jesus comes." The applause inside the church contrasted sharply with the anger outside it. The scandal reignited the Senate's earlier concerns about transparency and financial responsibility among televangelists. Although Dollar later acquired private jets through other means, the damage to his public image was permanent. To many, the jet symbolized everything critics feared, a pastor whose faith seemed to rise in direct proportion to his net worth. And as the scrutiny intensified, another painful chapter, far more personal, was about to unfold. Arrest, family turmoil, and the beginning of a public unraveling. For years, Creflo Dollar had seemed untouchable, a man whose influence stretched across continents, whose sermons reached billions of homes, and whose followers believed he carried unshakable spiritual authority. But in June 2012, everything changed inside his own home in Fayette County, Georgia. The pastor who preached discipline, faith, and divine order was suddenly placed in handcuffs. According to the police report, Dollar's 15-year-old daughter called authorities after a heated argument spiraled out of control. She claimed he choked her, wrestled her to the ground, punched her, and even hit her with a shoe when she refused his decision to stop her from attending a party. Officers documented a scratch on her neck, which she insisted came from the altercation. Dollar, however, told police it was simply eczema and that he had only restrained her after she hit him first. He admitted wrestling her to the floor, but denied choking or punching her. Within hours, news of his arrest spread nationwide. The image of a pastor being taken into custody contrasted sharply with the sermons he delivered each week about spiritual authority and family order. The charge, simple battery and cruelty to children, put his reputation under harsher scrutiny than ever before. Days later, Dollar stood before his congregation and called the accusations exaggerated. The church erupted in applause, many seeing him as a victim of misunderstanding and media distortion. Supporters said parents had a right to discipline their children. Critics argued that a line had been crossed and that religious communities too often defended leaders at the expense of victims. Legally, the case ended quietly. The charges were dropped after Dollar completed a court-ordered anger management program. But the damage lingered. For the first time, even some loyal followers privately wondered what was happening behind the scenes of the carefully polished world he presented. At the same time, skeptics revisited earlier concerns: the expensive homes, the unanswered financial questions, the growing distance between pastor and community. The arrest didn't just expose a family crisis. It exposed the human vulnerability beneath the empire he had built. And later, one announcement would shake that empire far more deeply than any scandal before. He publicly admitted one of the core teachings that built his ministry had been wrong all along. The shocking confession that changed everything. For more than 3 decades, Creflo Dollar built his empire on one message: tithing was a divine requirement. He preached it on television, wrote it in best-selling books, and repeated it in conferences around the world. To his followers, giving 10% of their income wasn't just generosity. It was a spiritual obligation, a key to unlocking God's financial favor. Many stretched their budgets, believing they were planting seeds that would return miracles. Dollar himself became one of the wealthiest pastors in America, with a net worth once estimated at $27 million. But in June 2022, he walked onto the stage of World Changers Church International and said words almost no one expected to hear. In a sermon titled "The Great Misunderstanding," Dollar told his congregation that his decades of teachings on tithing were wrong. He urged them to throw away every book, DVD, and sermon he had produced on the subject. He explained that tithing belonged to Old Testament law, and that Christians under grace were never meant to give out of fear, guilt, or obligation. It was a stunning reversal, the kind that left supporters stunned and critics furious. For some, it was an act of honesty. For others, it was an admission that came decades too late. Despite acknowledging his past mistakes, Dollar refused to apologize. He claimed that without preaching those teachings, he wouldn't have reached the spiritual understanding he has now. But many questioned the timing. His ministry had been built, financially and structurally, on the very doctrine he now rejected. People wondered if he would return money collected under teachings he now deemed incorrect. But Dollar offered no refunds, no reparations, no financial transparency. His luxury homes, cars, and private jets remained untouched. Watchdog groups continued to warn that his ministry lacked accountability. Theological critics said the reversal proved what they had argued for years, that the prosperity gospel was built on shaky foundations. Even some longtime followers felt betrayed, unsure what to believe after being told the cornerstone of their giving had been a misunderstanding. The confession didn't destroy Creflo Dollar's ministry, but it changed how millions viewed him. And for the first time, the man who preached wealth, certainty, and divine order began facing a different narrative, one where the prosperity he promised others could no longer protect him from the consequences of his own teachings. What do you think about Pastor Creflo Dollar's recent troubles? Do you believe he should take responsibility for the teachings he now rejects? Share your opinion below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories just like this.